welcome to government class. In today's government class, we'll be looking at some of the problems of revenue allocation or conflict over the adoption of revenue allocation formula. So we'll be looking at some of the problems of revenue allocation in Nigeria. The first problem we'll be looking at is population census. With the context of Nigerian federalism, there is always conflict over the use of the population principle for allocation of revenues among the states. This happens because the region or states, they inflate the number of their population by manipulating the results of the census so that they can have a larger allocation of the national income, of the nation's revenue. So this is one of the problems of revenue allocation in Nigeria, because when the principle of population is used, when they use the population principle to allocate resources in the country, states begin to inflate the number of their population so that they can receive larger allocation from the national income. So this is one of the problems of revenue allocation. Another problem is the technicality of the formula. Majority of the states in Nigeria always have the impression that the technicality or the ambiguity of the formula, the technicality and ambiguity of formula recommended by some of the revenue allocation commissions were to enrich some states at the expense of others. So some states they feel that the technicality and the ambiguity of the formulas recommended by the Revenue Allocation Commission is so that it's because they want to enrich some states at the expense of the other states. For instance, the recommendation made by the Okibo Commission of 1980 was rejected by Nigerians on the ground of technicality, that it was too technical to understand, and because they could not understand it, it meant that they wanted to exploit them by enriching some states at their own expense. So these are some of the problems of revenue allocation, the technicality of the formula. Another problem of revenue allocation is interstate conflict. Interstate conflict. The conflict that always break up among the states in Nigeria concerning the agreement over what proportion of national revenue should be allocated to each of the states is another problem confronting revenue allocation in Nigeria. So another problem we have in Nigeria, another revenue allocation problem that we have in Nigeria is interstate conflict. Conflict always breaks up among states in Nigeria concerning the agreeable means of distributing the nation's income, concerning the agreeable means of distributing the nation's revenue, the nation's resources, and it's like they never come to a conclusion. Today you say derivation principles, those that they don't have natural resources in their states, they feel like they are doing it to exploit them. If you use population principle, those with lesser population feel it is to exploit them. If you use the principle of needs, those that are already developed, they think it's to exploit them. And so it's like they never reach a conclusion. So the interstate conflict that always breaks up among the states in Nigeria concerning the agreeable method or what principle to allocate the national resources to, or what proportion of national resources should be allocated to each state is a very big problem in revenue allocation in Nigeria. Another problem of revenue allocation in Nigeria is the use of derivation principle. The use of derivation principle in allocating resources among the tiers of government has caused controversies in the country. So the use of the derivation principles, that's the principle whereby depending on the natural resources that a state produces or is able to generate, that is what would determine the national revenue that would be allocated, the amount of national revenue that will be allocated to that state. And this principle has caused a lot of controversies in the country. States with abundant national resources, such as all producing states, are agitating for more allocation, while states with larger population and lesser resources are pressing to have more allocation. So the use of derivation principle has caused a lot of controversies in the country, because those states that have larger population but lesser natural resources, they feel left out. They feel that because they are not producing enough, they are not giving enough. They are not giving enough national revenue for their states to cater for the needs of their states, while those that are producing natural resources, such as all producing states, they are agitating for more allocation. Another problem of revenue allocation is mismanagement of funds, misappropriation and embezzlement of public generated funds, which tends to reduce the amount of revenues available for allocation among the tiers of government. So mismanagement of the funds, mismanagement of the national revenue, and embezzlement of public generated funds it leads to the reduction of the amount of revenue that is available for allocation. So for example, we have 5 billion naira to allocate to all the states, but those in power, the cankerworms of our nation that has eaten deep into our fabric, they take their own part. At the end of the day, the 5 billion is left with 3 billion, and they have to share this 3 billion to 36 states. So mismanagement of funds and embezzlement of public generated funds always leads to the reduction of the amount of money or the amount of revenue that is allocated to the ties of government, to the different ties of government. And this is also another cause of conflict over revenue allocation in Nigeria. This is also one cause of conflict concerning revenue allocation in Nigeria. The fact that the funds that are supposed to be shared among these states and local governments, they have already, some people have put it in their personal pockets, and then the crumbs that remain will now be distributed to the state, and it cannot be enough. It cannot reach anywhere. So this is another problem of revenue allocation. The next problem we'll be looking at is intrastate conflict. In most cases, there is always problem in arriving at the means or measure in which each state allocates revenue to the local government. So this is intrastate conflict. This is not conflict between two states. This is conflict within the states, the local government within the state. So in most cases, there is always problem in arriving at the acceptable means or the acceptable means or measure in which the state's resources, the state allocates revenues to the local government from the state's generated funds. The use of equality of local government authorities is common, but this does not favor the local governments that are larger in size. So every local government is given the same amount of money, regardless of their size, and this cannot favor those local governments that have larger populations. They will not be able to cater for their population with the same amount given to those who have lesser population. So intrastate conflict is also one of the conflicts that come up when we talk about revenue allocation in Nigeria. And this has to do with how the states themselves allocate revenue to the local government from the state generated funds. So this is a problem within the states, and it deals with the state and the local government, how the state allocates resources to the local government. And with this, we've come to the end of this class. In the course of this class, we looked at some of the problems of revenue allocation in Nigeria, or conflict over the adoption of revenue allocation formulas that have been used. And with this, we've come to the end of this class, and I'll see you at the next class.